All right, I think we are live. Give me a sec here. I'm just gonna hit the starting screen so people can't see us. There we go. Stream is starting. Double checking all the things. Be weird if people can hear us. I think I still. I think I still need to hit the live button. No, we gotta do stream key. Hang on a sec. We've got. You can hear me. All right, YouTube is throwing me an error, so bear with me a couple seconds here. Thanks, Sandra. Good to see you again. Hey, Tom. We can hear you, can't see me. Interesting. Well, why don't we come on and say hello while I figure this out. Hey, everybody. I'm Colin. I got Celia and Jonathan with me again. And today we were talking about how to write sales emails. Hey, Tony, how are you? Bloomington, Indiana. Perfect. Randy from the Bay Area. Awesome. Where's everybody from today? Where's everybody else from today? I'm from Vancouver, or I'm in Vancouver, where I usually am. Chat, let me know. Alabama, nice. Ontario, cool. Celia, where are you today? Not at the gym, I see. You made it back.
Vancouver.
And how about Jonathan here?
Well, we all used to work at the same office, so I'm also in Vancouver.
I'm wondering if I'm really struggling here to see. Here we go. I'm just checking the stream health just to make sure I'm getting weird errors. Julio Lopez from Texas, good to see you again. Carrie from Tampa. Got some Toronto fans here. All right, looks like we are good to go and we are live. Perfect. I will stop focusing on the technical things and we'll get on with the stream. But great to see everybody. Thanks for joining us. And today we're talking about how to write sales emails that convert. This is something that we're going to be doing every month. And so you may have heard some of this. We're going to start off with a couple of reminders. So if you recognize the slides, no spoilers. Don't spoil it for everybody else in chat and everybody else that's watching. But we're going to do a little bit of a refresher on just sort of the framework and the methodology, and then we're going to we'll branch out a little bit. So we're going to cover the same topic, but we're going to cover different things than we covered last month. And as a reminder, we are doing this every month. And so we're going to do this particular segment every month. And so if you do want some help, next time, if you want to come and join us live and get our help on your messaging, just send that to Marisol. She's in chat and she'll help get that taken care of for you. So with that being said, Jonathan, Celia, what makes a good sales email?
That's a great question, Colin. Why don't I share my screen here? Everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Awesome, Celia. What makes a great sales email?
Yeah, so I mean, we kind of talked about this last time, just a reminder for everybody. The key principles of writing a good email is for it to be clear, concise, personal, and relevant. So basically, you want the person to know what you're contacting them for. Make sure it's short and sweet. Make sure it's relevant to who you're talking to. You don't want to be talking about finance to somebody who's doing, like, I don't know, health and wellness as their job position. And so that kind of goes into persona too. Make sure you're targeting the person you want to be targeting with the type of messaging that you're going to them.
Awesome. And so just to expand on a couple things that we're going to be covering today, we have this checklist from last time. And so, when we're thinking about an email being clear, is it simple? To talk about how the prospect's world can be better? Does your CTA make sense? Do they have to think hard? You don't want your prospect to have to think hard, typically. Does it flow? When it's concise, it just needs to be short. That's all I'll say on that one. Generally speaking, does it sound like a real person? Relevant, to Celia's point, you need to speak to people about what they care about because they unfortunately don't care about you typically. And so it's what is it that they're actually trying to do right now in the language that they're thinking about, not necessarily what you think they should be doing. And try to paint a picture with what you're saying. And then making it personal, why them, why now? There's a balance between kind of personalization and scale that I think we'll talk about a little bit later. But they need to see that the email is for them, essentially.
Perfect. And Stacy was just asking, will we share these slides afterwards? I'm thinking we will, but it'll cost you. You can send me one full Bitcoin, and I'll share the slides with you to my personal account. Don't listen to Marisol. She'll share them with you for free. So maybe she can get those up in the chat at some point here. So if we look at, we've got a couple of people. Can I pay you in Trident layers? You certainly can. So we've got a couple of examples that we're going to go into a little bit later and help some people troubleshoot some messaging. And so if you do have some messaging that you want to hand with, whether it's a cold email, a follow-up email, whatever it is, hit up Marisol. She's in chat. Let her know, and we'll get that built into our slides, into our whatever we got. But I did want to start with, before we get into the specifics of like people's individual messaging, I'm curious. I have a question for Jonathan. So if I think logically, and maybe we can kill the screen share here. If I'm thinking about, like, let's assume that the emails are landing in people's inboxes. We'll leave the whole deliverability conversation for a different stream. That first piece of, like, if I look at the top of the funnel, is really getting their attention and getting them to open the email in the first place. And so how do you, like, what does it look like, and how do you think about subject lines?
Yeah, absolutely. So people get a lot of emails, a little less so in Canada. Maybe that's because I'm not high up on the totem pole. I'm sure Colin gets a lot of emails still. But you have to figure out how to stand out amongst all of, that crowd. And so there's, a few ways to do that. But generally speaking, what we found to be, maybe not quite a formula, but a good guideline for approaching subject lines is 1 to 3 words, roughly. Shorter is better. I think sales law research shows that 1 word actually has the highest open rates, but that's not always super feasible. But a couple words that are relevant to the prospect and what they care about, but are somewhat ambiguous. So they need to go into that email to really understand what you're talking about. Bonus points if it's related to, if it's something that could potentially be like an internal email, as long as you're not leading them astray and that there is congruence to your actual, from your subject line to your email. But, just for some examples that we had here.
And maybe before you jump into the examples, chat, let me know what are your favorite subject lines, or what's a subject line you want us to comment on, have a look at. And so maybe it's just if you're live with us, what's the last subject line that you sent on a cold or follow-up email to one of your prospects, or what's one of your favorites? So let me know in chat. So Jonathan, what are some examples?
Yeah, so kind of some examples of this and their open rates. So these were across 3 email cadence, just user conversion. 2 words, simple, was relevant to that particular persona. I can't remember exactly what his campaign was, but across 3 emails had 69% open rates. I did one. We were targeting customer support leaders in e-commerce, and the question was, or the subject line was order status? ? Oh. Now you can't do that unless your email is very clearly related to that, and it was related to them being overwhelmed by order status requests and it taking up too much time for their reps. So be careful that you're not being clickbaity, but you want them to wonder, like, oh, what is this, and see that this is relevant to them.
Celia, what's your thoughts on the sort of what did you call it? What was it, Jonathan? Order confirmation. Order status?
Order status? ?
I bet you that would get a huge response rate, wouldn't it?
It worked pretty well. It did. We had a 57% open rate. But again, it was the message was very clearly about that topic. So we weren't leading people astray. Just a little bit, but not.
That's fair.
In a questionable way.
That's sort of how I always approach it as well. Taking a couple words from the body of the actual email you're sending, I find performs quite well. So just like whatever you're making mention of in that email, throw 2 or 3 words of that into the subject line. Usually you'll get people to answer.
I've got a kindred spirit in chat here. Paul said his favorite was "You're fired." Got 100% open rate, but the responses weren't so great. Paul, was that an internal email that you sent? Dear team, you're fired.
Everyone.
Let's see. We've got Sandra. Her favorite was brief conversation. Question mark.
So we've always found too, just like internally, things like quick question, right direction, things like that. Those are foolproof ways to definitely get someone to open the email.
Yeah, that's Paul's got another one. This song's gonna be stuck in my head, you jerk. Can't touch this. ...
These are very creative.
Mm-hmm. No, my question is, what song comes to mind? Is it the original version or is it the Family Guy version? When you first hear those words.
The original for me.
Definitely the original.
Yeah, it's a bit of both for me.
But Family Guy.
There were a lot of Family Guy episodes. It's hard to.
Peter does his own version of it. When this isn't a Family Guy podcast. Jonathan Scott is saying qualified lead generating live chat solution. Did you say? Oh no, he didn't say lead twice. That's long, man. That's what's your open rate look like on that one, Jonathan? Let us know. Celia, what's your take?
I feel like it's a little long. Qualified lead generating solution.
Live chat solution.
Live. So yeah, I'd cut out a couple words from there. It's very long.
Yeah, he said he sent it to one guy. So open rate 0.
Yeah. I think you can get away with some longer.
Something like that. I was just saying something like qualified lead solution would probably work better. I think just cut out some words.
Yeah, I think you can get away with longer subject lines if you've like really nailed what that person cares about and what they're thinking about. So if it's just like, if it's longer, but that's the exact thought, problem, thing they're focused on, they'll click it. It's just hard in many cases to get to that level of granularity, because if you're just a little bit off, then it just doesn't work, right?
So if we had to brainstorm some solutions for Jonathan here, and just for clarity, chat Jonathan, not Jonathan in, Zoom Jonathan. So his was qualified lead generating live chat solution. What would so chat? Let me know. What would you do? And why don't we start with Celia? How would you change this one up?
I just said qualified lead solution.
But I didn't think it was a good answer, so I was going to give you a second go.
Okay. You really have to think about who you're targeting with that type of stuff too, because a lot of people are talking about getting you qualified leads. So it might be worth considering if there's something else entirely you could say that maybe isn't that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or even maybe chat leads from chat, something like that, where you're still maintaining your context, but it's 2-3 words instead of 6.
Brian Petro is saying, what about prospect name plus my first name? My firm name, sorry.
We've definitely tried that in the past.
I think that worked really well at one point, and I think a lot of people are doing it now. I think you might even be better off just putting your company name by itself.
Totally. Laura is saying live chat qualified leads. I think the thing that I go to, especially, so step 1, look in your spam filters, right? Look in that folder that you never go into and see all of the emails that you're getting, and then make sure none of the words from those emails are in. I mean, obviously, like those are all acceptable, but none of the the major keywords that are going to be in those are going to be in your email. And I feel like lead generation, I get a million of those. And I know there's a lot of shops, and I know we do what you could call lead generation or appointment setting or, sales development. But there's so many out there that I'm not even sure if they're real companies, because they're just sending from crazy Gmail names, and they're just blasting out as much as they can. But it's lead generation and remote developers and Viagra, I think are the big ones. Maybe Viagra is an old one that used to lock up my inbox when I would get when I was using Outlook back 20 years ago. But I would almost avoid saying leads, because I think you're leading them too far down you're too far into the solution space. If we channel our inner Kenny McKenzie, and he was our chief product officer for a while, super awesome entrepreneur. he would talk about the sort of, there's the problem space and the solution space. And the problem space is like, I need to grow the company, right? And that's probably a bit too high, but the solution space is, I want to grow the company using a live chat solution. And we probably want to meet somewhere in the middle. And so I'm thinking qualified lead generating chat solution, one, too long, two, we're too deep into the solution space. We want to pull it up a level and talk about, is it more conversations with people from your website? Are they thinking about live chat? Question mark. Let's see, we've got any chats here. What's in chat we work with? Okay, cool. Your competitor, Harsh Deep saying, your competitor is undercutting you. I love it. I love it so much. So Jonathan, Scott, I hope that was helpful here. Let's have another look at a couple others. Sandra was saying, great for fundraising. Tony's control expenses with confidence. Tony, let me know what kind of, I'm assuming you're doing some, I don't want to say like Expensify kind of thing, or like a procurement management tool. Let me know in chat, what's the context there? Jonathan, what do you think of that? Control expenses with confidence.
Maybe a little general. I think you might want to, and once you let us know what particular area you focus on, I think you might want to be more specific about the types of expenses. Just like Colin was saying, right? This is like super high level thing, which is like grow revenue, manage costs, and then there's like the really precise thing, and then there's that somewhere in the middle.
Totally. So Tony is saying expense analysis.
So what is a way to maybe say that from a loss aversion standpoint? So like what is the risk of them not doing this well, right? And then maybe you can frame it within a couple words of like, here's like, this is the potential thing that could go wrong or is going wrong if you're not doing this, or you're missing this or something like that.
Interesting. So you're going from problem space to, I guess you're drawing back to problem space. I was going through like, if you think problem space and then like the solution space, and then there's this third alternate universe where it's after you've implemented the solution, like this is the thing, this is that sort of aha moment. And so I love the thought there is like, so Tony, how do we frame that in like, I guess, what's the downside of not controlling expenses, or what's the upside? What's that magic aha moment that you're going to get to? Various expense analysis, various segments. So yeah, if I can analyze, like, I bet you analyzing expenses is super broad. Like I'd be curious, like, are there specific industries that use your tool in a certain way? And then you could sort of, I guess, target the campaign that way. So say, for example, let's use old Colin of the past. I used to sell and rent diesel generators. And my primary source of lead gen, and I kid you not, was driving on to construction sites that I had sort of a relationship with somebody. I'd bring the whole team donuts. And so I would go and I would expense donuts. And so my controller would want to see, how much are we spending on donuts, or like donut-based lead gen, so we could get like a return on that investment. And so, if you know that this is obviously a silly example, but if you knew that the majority of your customers had this use case, you'd be like, donut cost to acquire a customer, or cost to acquire a customer using donuts, question mark. And this is obviously a silly and bad example, but you can see how we're going sort of one layer deeper. But it would require you to like really segment your campaigns and build the messaging around that initial, that sort of idea. Tony, let us know. Is that helpful? Are we off in left field here? Let's see. Paul's, you got fired. I see that, and I find that hilarious. Big Skinny is saying name plus automation. Brian's saying original. I think he was commenting on somebody else's, although original all lowercase, that's like, might create some curiosity. Let's see. Caesar, how you doing, buddy? Your name at company name works really well, tested through outreach. I love it. And this is such an important piece. Like we should add that any of the caveat, that any of the advice or any of the comments or recommendations you get from us from chat, they're not going to be guaranteed to be right. There's no such thing as silver bullets. And if there were, I'd be selling them for $1 million and not working very hard. So take all of this with a grain of salt. Take what we're sharing with you and do your diligence to do your testing here.
Yeah, I think the main point of that is just A/B test it out. Like, take what we're telling you and, try some different things.
Awesome. We got Alpha Rank here. What could be the best subject line strategy to a bank C-level? Alpha Rank. We work with banks, CUs, targeting C-level. Let us know, Alpha Rank. What are you doing? I guess I could do a quick Google, but Celia, have you done anything to banks?
I've targeted banks in the past, absolutely, but I would definitely want to know, what the company is doing or what the product is or who you're trying to target. With just that broad of a piece of information, it's pretty hard to.
So I've got their website here, and it says digital transformation fast. Double your virtual branch performance in less than 30 days with automated customer journey mapping. So that's some more context there. So are we going after? So, maybe Alpha, let us know. We're going after C-level execs? Is that really is that your end target, or are you trying to get a referral to the right person? Because this seems like if I'm thinking of somebody like Wells Fargo, which I see as one of your customers or backers, this probably is not. I guess the question is this on the C-level agenda, or are you going to be referred down to somebody who's more in the digital space? What are your thoughts here, Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm looking at the website too. So it seems like it's a little more kind of marketing or digital banking focused. Like maybe you're reaching out to the VP or director of digital banking or someone on the marketing side. If virtual branch is like a common term, then something like virtual branch performance might work. I have targeted banking, but I'm not familiar with that specific term.
You've done some digital transformation stuff, haven't you, John?
Yeah, it was related to banking digital transformation, but we weren't using that particular phrase.
Subject line to use.
Cool.
Not one that would have been probably relevant to this one. It was more like an API related solution.
Gotcha. So Alpha Rank is going after the chief lending officer for auto loan leads that come to their website, and they lose them on a digital medium. Okay, so it is like they're going after the chief lending officer. So if we're building a subject line for Alpha, you could play to I think there's two ways you could approach this, and you got to be careful because we're sort of in that kind of in that lead space, and we want to avoid setting them off. But I think if you're looking at, you can go the loss aversion route, or you can go the sort of growth route. So if we did the loss aversion, you could you'd want to set up the tone of that email, or the sort of key idea of that email to share the idea that, hey, you're losing, X percent, or our customers used to lose, X percent of their leads on this. So it could be around sort of lead efficiency. It could be around how many leads do you lose on your site? Or it could be something along those lines. But chat, I got Caesar, Caesar in here with Julio. Let us know, how would you frame this up? If you're taking the loss aversion piece on the growth side of things, you could really focus more on I don't know. You could take the ROI route. Really well. Also, if I'm running this through my words to not put in a subject line, Celia, what do you think about sort of generate 400x ROI or 400% ROI, more ROI from your leads?
I think that would go straight into spam immediately. I don't think you would ever see that. Anything with numbers, ROI, revenue, dollar signs.
What if I added a whole bunch of dollar signs? Would it counteract?
Maybe. Give it a shot.
Yeah, so here's a question for Celia and John. Brian Petra is saying, we all know that fear, like loss aversion, is a great motivator, but is it a good touch? Is it a good first touch?
I find in a body of an email, it's great. In a subject line, it could be interesting. I can't say I've done a lot of testing using that sort of format. It definitely does do quite well in bodies, however. So what do you think, John?
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking on the topic of the body again, so you're reaching out to someone who doesn't know who you are and they don't care. And the thing that we have to understand is that they are accomplishing whatever job that it is that they're doing in some way right now, right? That way might suck, but they're still accomplishing it. So you need to motivate people to be willing to invest the time to figure out if they want to make a change. And they're much more likely to make a change to get away from something that they don't like than to move towards something that's maybe an incremental improvement, or maybe it's generally an improvement, but they're like, I have a million other priorities. If you can come at them and you can say, hey, you know what, these are all the things that suck about your day. You don't have to do those things anymore. They're much more likely to want to engage with you. Or if you're like, hey, you know what, you're missing out on X, Y, Z that all your competitors are being able to take advantage of. There's this inherent desire to kind of keep up is really important or really motivating.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a great reminder, is that they're already probably doing something like this. And if I think about one of the books I read that recently was Principles. Well, not super recently, but recently enough. And one of the things I pulled out of that was that believability weighted decision making. I'm going to trust Celia and John on messaging like crazy because I've seen them do it a whole bunch. I know they have really successful customers. And if I was writing cold email, I'd write a version of it and I'd send it to them and they would laugh at me and they'd offer me some really helpful suggestions. Because I'm not writing cold email. I might know a lot about the sort of general high level stuff, but in terms of like writing cold emails and things every day, it's not something I'm doing. And so my believability from the two of them, if they're sending me those recommendations, really, really strong. But if somebody's reaching out over email and I have this much of a relationship with them, like nothing at all, I'm going to give them about 4 seconds. And so I guess if you're to the point of, should we start with that fear, you're probably like, I probably am not going to react super well to that. Because I'm going to say, I don't believe you. You're trying to go to that emotional hook too quickly. So you want to build a bit more of a relationship before your comment, whether it's right or wrong, is going to be received well.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Why them? Why them? Why now?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can get into that.
Totally. All right. I think Paul was building on my previous subject line, want a free donut? Love it. So Randy's got a question for Merrill. What was your click-through rate on how to write sales emails that convert? I think it was 110%, because everything Merrill does is 110%. But Merrill, if you're in chat and you haven't already seen that, have a look, let us know. Slightly different context, because that one is like an opted-in list that we've sent to before, whereas a lot of the things we're talking about is cold email. But Big Skinny is asking, so Merrill will let you know, or Slack me and let me know. And there's the chat. Sound is good. Okay. Merrill, let me know. What's that call, or what was our open rate on that email? Big Skinny was asking, how do we feel about emojis in the subject line? Celia, why don't you start?
I mean, who are you sending it to? I probably wouldn't do it. We have kind of tested around with GIFs and things like that in the body of the email. I know I keep talking about the body of the email. I think you can get away with a lot more there than you can in a subject line. To me, getting a subject line with some emojis in it is almost coming across pretty spammy. Like I'm getting some weird ad for something. That's just my personal opinion. I probably wouldn't do it, but that's just me.
Yeah. So chat, what do you think? I'm hearing Tony is very against, or sorry, Paul is very against, Paul and Tony, very against emojis. Chat, let me know. What do you think? Emojis? And if so, how would you lead off, or how would you open, could you open an email, or sorry, would you open an email that was just emojis only? Sandra's like, nope. John, what do you think? And then I'm going to force Celia to so John, you answer, but while John is answering, Celia, if you could only send an emoji in the subject line, what emoji would you use? So John,
This one.
in a follow-up email, that'd be perfect. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between there's a big difference between, I think, marketing emails and cold sales emails and then reaching out to a list, right? You can get away with a lot of things to a list or like a more kind of like broad general marketing email. But if you're just reaching out to, I don't know, I don't see like the VP of digital banking at Wells Fargo being like, oh, look at all these emojis in the subject line. I was pulling up some sales off research. I can't remember if they touched on that.
While you
Celia,
look at that,
yeah.
I'll talk about the sort of like what I'm seeing on the marketing side of things, because I think a big trend that we're seeing is like just overall, at least one that I've seen a number of times, is like things sort of start in consumer and then they make their way to B2B. For example, the stream you're on right now, this really started with Justin TV 10 years ago, which was like, hey, it was one dude, he's gonna stream all the stuff he was doing. And then pivoted from Justin TV to Twitch TV and was watching people game, and streaming was the big gaming thing. And now we've been live for 31 minutes in a B2B context. And so like I'm seeing this sort of slow adoption. And if you had told me 5 years ago that B2B streaming was going to be a thing, I would have laughed at you and said, you're crazy. So maybe this emoji thing is one of those, like, I've certainly seen it in a couple of newsletters that I'm on, but those are regular newsletters. And so maybe that is the sort of leading edge thing that's going to help you stand out. And any of the research that we find is probably going to be out of date. And, I was having this conversation yesterday with somebody on the team, which is like, if we're not trying things that don't do well, like if we're afraid to fail, you're never going to try anything new that actually works and have any of those like breakthrough moments. So would I do that? Maybe. I would be cautious about sending out an emoji to a campaign where I'm doing a whole bunch of them, right? Like if you've got a list of like 100 prospects that you're going to ping with like a cold email that's not super personalized, maybe not. I probably wouldn't, unless there was like that perfect emoji that just like really summed up the email, but I don't know if that exists. But would I send one as a follow-up or in like something where I'm hyper personalizing to an exec that I've seen use emojis in their, like on LinkedIn, and they've used an emoji? Would I do that? I probably would do that. And Brian's suggesting that we should get that little I love, or the we are live emoji button in our email subject line. I think that's a great one. So Big Skinny, what emoji have you used emojis? Tony's saying poop emoji. I'll never not laugh at a poop joke. Perfect. Oh, looks like we already did use the emoji in our subject line. So see, we're doing it. Mero, quit telling me I'm wrong. Leave me alone. Did you find that subject line? Or sorry, did you find our open rate for our email that went out earlier today or yesterday? So let me know. So that's emojis. Celia, closing thoughts. If you've already said your follow-up emoji would be this. John, what about yours?
Ooh, that's a good one, Celia.
One I use all the time, so just rolling with it.
It would just be so contextual to what I was writing. The shrug is great because, especially like late into the sequence, be like, why don't you love me? Or, something like that. But if I were to ever use an emoji, it would have to be like really consistent with what I was writing about. So it would be hard for me to pull that up right now. It's a good example.
That's fair. Oh, Mero had actually messaged me a while ago. I'm just a jerk and didn't read her Slack or her Zoom chat. So our first email about the live stream had an open rate of 20.4%. The one where we announced we were live in 5 minutes had an open rate of 27%. And I'm hearing that we had an emoji in one, if not both of those. So cool. I think I love the time pressure element of this one here, of like what Mero has, like, hey, we're live in 5 minutes. It's very specific, it's very actionable, and it makes it very easy to say, yes, I want to come join, or no, I'm not going to come join, right? Whereas like, hey, we're going to do something in the future eventually, there's no fear of losing out because there's no implied time limit. Whereas like, hey, we're live in 5 minutes. It's like, if you don't show up in 5 minutes, this email is irrelevant. And I love that sort of piece. I don't know if you were doing that intentionally, but I think that's super helpful. Julio asked a question a while ago. I'm working my way down through chat, and I promise I will do my best to get to you. I've got a couple call to actions, a couple of reminders. I actually am doing just because I'm not good at scheduling and wasn't paying attention. We've got a live podcast. We're doing this for the first time. I've got Greg Callahan from Bain, like not the Batman villain, but the company, the consulting company. And we're going to be talking about like basically how they work accounts, and they've got some cool software that they want to promote, but we're really going to be talking about the research that they've done around basically, it's account planning. Thank you. So their research around account planning, and that's going to be at 1 o'clock Pacific. So that's in about 2 hours. I don't think we're going to be this will be continuous, but if people are hanging out, then maybe I'll just power through. And Celia and John can go have their lunch. But I just want to remind everybody, 1 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, so 2 hours. We got Craig coming on, and we're going to be talking about account planning. Now, Julio, you're talking about any ideas for a construction company targeting schools and parks offering upgrades on the play areas or playgrounds. So construction company targeting schools and parks. So we're probably talking like, I guess, schools, so we're in the education sector, and parks, which are probably cities. From my experience, like one of our first like really long-standing customers, they were going after cities, and they had bonkers reply rates. Like the reply rates for this one company were so good that it made us look like so good and consistent that I actually thought there might have been a bug in our software, because they were just like, they were always here, and everybody else, the average was here, but they were consistently here, and it almost didn't matter. Now, this is my data here is like a few years ago, but going to cities, they had amazing open and reply rates. The conversion, I mean, it was a long sale, and I think their thing, and so this is contextual to their specific product. It was a fairly decently sized sale, and it was one of those that unless there's an immediate issue, it's not like a top priority. But when something breaks, it's going to be a huge problem. So they had a very long sales cycle. So what I saw were great open rates, great reply rates, tons of conversations, slow pipeline. Now the slow pipeline, I can't say was specific to them and their product or to that industry, but Celia, John, I know you've probably had some campaigns going after the cities. What are your thoughts here?
Cities are definitely sort of a long burn, anything governmental, especially now, given sort of the current climate of things. It is definitely a great place to go because people are generally interested in having a conversation, but it is a long turnaround to make that deal happen. But they're usually big deals. So
cool. And chat, if you're going after, or do you have experience going after cities? If so, cities, municipalities, or education? If so, what's worked well for you all? Jonathan, your thoughts, and then we'll start looking at what a good opening subject line might be for Julio.
Yeah, I just think short, sweet again. Same thing. It's, the principles are generally consistent. I do find that cities are quite responsive. Same thing. So run into the sales cycle issue. So some clients, if that's like your core demographic, then that makes perfect sense. Target that. If you have many different demographics, be aware that you can kind of get lulled into this sense of security by the early initial positive responses of the campaign, but the translation of that into revenue can be very long. So if you can target a bunch of different sectors, just be mindful of that. Yeah. As far as like specific subject lines go, I would just keep it short and sweet. Playgrounds, something about children. That's not creepy.
Something about children.
Keep it general, right? Like it doesn't have to be. You don't have to go crazy and tell them, exactly what you're reaching out about. This has to be something related to them. Like if you're reaching out to the Parks Board in Vancouver or something, and you're talking about, I'd say something like playgrounds or community something, or whatever kind of ties in. You're not going to be able to communicate what you do and the value in that subject line. They just have to open the email, right?
I think my 2 cents would be either monkey bars ? And then ask like, when was the last time you upgraded your monkey bars? Or I think expert level sales development email tactic right here, if you can pull it off, and I'm not sure how. Seeing that your name is Julio, and I'm not sure if it's like I'm hoping you pronounce it that way. You've got to work in a Paul Simon quote there, and only people that are of a certain musical background, I think, are going to appreciate that one. That's a yeah, Paul Simon deep cut. But the song is Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard, and I think if you could work that in, you know, the audience that you're targeting, they're probably going to get that reference. And I will always, that's my personality. If I could work in a pun to the email, or just like play on a musical lyric, I will do that. It's not something you can scale up, and it's something that's got to be fairly personalized, and you have to be somewhat confident it's going to resonate. If you're sending an email to somebody who's in their like 40s and 50s, I probably wouldn't be referencing a Taylor Swift song, but you know, this audience, they might resonate with Paul Simon. So I'm going to move on here. Noah's asking a little bit deeper into the email. Any thoughts on how to add the key question, the call to action to that first email? So like, what if you could, or have you already considered, or are you available for a quick call? So really, like, what is the call to action? And I guess, how are we aligning it with the rest of the email? And so maybe I'll start with a slightly different question. So great question, Noah. Thank you for bringing that up. Celia, are you starting with a call to action? Are you available for a quick call or time Tuesday? Or do you start a little bit broader? Like, what's your approach there?
Yeah, so generally with a first email, you don't want to jump straight into that call to action. It's definitely valuable to have some form of call to action, whether it be a question or something like that, but definitely not saying like, hey, do you have time for a call? We were actually talking about this yesterday in a meeting, and you kind of have to look at it in the same frame that you would look at going on dates with people. You don't want to be way too forceful. You just want to be cool about it. Slide your way in.
I'm not going to touch that. Jonathan, follow-ups.
Yeah, sure.
No, weird. It's true.
It's true. Yeah, you know, it's not
Forceful
like,
is not
here's
the
my
word
email, and then, you know, slap them in the face.
Don't be aggressive, right? Okay?
Yeah. So there are some demographics where being very upfront and straightforward and going for a call is very common because they do a lot of business on the phone still. Right? We see that in a lot of more physical industries, maybe manufacturing, you know, plant managers, construction, things like that. You know, freight, logistics, like they're talking to people all day on the phone. That's super common. So if you have something interesting, you want to talk on the phone, that's great. You're targeting a VP of like software engineering, probably not as enthused about just spontaneously getting on the phone with you without really clarifying that this is something relevant and worthwhile to them. Gong actually released a very comprehensive little piece of collateral on subject lines recently, where, you know, they've got like 27 examples, and I think it really depends on what the rest of your message looks like in the tone. Maybe I could just shoot that to Marisol. We could throw it in the chat or something.
Cool.
But lots of content there.
While you do, Lisa is what's up, Lisa? She's voicing her support for Celia's methodology, not too forceful. I agree with you. I don't think I would use that analogy particularly. But if you think about the sorry, I'm looking at Mark's comment. He said best dating advice ever. Thank you, Celia.
No problem.
I think so much of it depends on the context of your product, right? Is it fairly commoditized? Is it brand new? If it's fairly commoditized, you know, if it's brand new, you really have to be selling on the problem space because they're not going to have seen this before. If it's commoditized, you probably want to go with the piece that's most relevant to them. So it sort of exists on that spectrum. If I pull it back to, you know, whether you go up or down or side to side, it doesn't really matter. But like on the spectrum of sort of problem space, so like I'm struggling with X versus like solution space, which is this is how I'm going to solve X. If I'm selling something that's new and new, unheard of. People aren't going to understand the application of. I can't jump right to like, oh, I'm going to sell you this. It's an AI for this. Then I'm going to stick to the problem space. And I'm probably going to ask more along the lines of like, is this relevant to you? As opposed to like, hey, can we jump on a call? And so you're going for the confirmation of like, is this something that you're thinking about? I see Celia nodding. I know you've run a bunch of these campaigns. Celia actually ran our outbound validation service, or heads our outbound validation. And my mic is low compared to everybody else's. I can boost that up. So Celia has run tons of these campaigns. So what are your thoughts on the sort of, is this relevant to you approach?
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. When you're starting, unless you are 100% sure that you know you're targeting the right person with the right message, then I think it's always valuable to say something along those lines, whether it be, is this relevant? Would this be useful? Is this something you'd be interested in learning more about? Those are the types of things that you want to say within that first message, because it's sort of like going back to my last point. Let's make it a little bit more appropriate this time. You
Thank you.
just so you really want to, it's more of an exploratory thing. You're not coming in and just being like, hey, let's get on a call, I'm going to sell you something. You want to understand if that's something that they even have any jurisdiction over. So you really want to do it more in that sort of format of, is this relevant? Are you the correct person? And if they're not, then generally they're going to give you a referral to who you do need to be talking to, which is a win-win. So,
and I just wanted to connect the dots here, because we were talking about subject lines and then we jumped to the call to action. If you're using this, is this relevant to you? Call to action. You want to use your subject line in the body to set up that sort of pain point of like, I'm trying to direct your brain to think about this specific thing. So like if we're talking about, I don't know, say we're talking about selling headphones. That's not a good example. What if we're selling, let's go back to the financial software, right? We were talking about selling software that helped them improve their lead conversion on auto loans. So the problem space, so I guess what would the problem space be for this one, right? Like what are they struggling with? It's probably something along the lines of revenue growth, maybe. Jonathan, what do you think?
I mean, that's like the really high level thing. On like the more specific level, there's probably some, UX issue with the process of setting up, like signing up for the auto loan online. There's some like lack of efficiency there, or it's not really clear how to get to that point. But ultimately, they're trying to drive more revenue through the lending.
Mm-hmm. And so we're like, maybe we're setting it up to talk about sort of like revenue growth, and then the body sort of tells the story about, how their customers, or how, this customer is sort of dealing with this pain of like, they're losing X percentage of their, what were they, auto loans, loan leads. And then, and so you're not talking about the product itself, you're talking about the problem space. And then the call to action is, does this resonate with you? And I'm stealing that from Harsh in chat here. Harsh, thank you. Do you resonate with this? He's got a couple others. Subject line, your competitor is undercutting you. CTA, do you resonate with this? Interesting. I'm not sure. Let's see here. Do you resonate with this problem? Yeah. Also, Stacy, thanks for the heads up about my mic volume. How is it now compared to everybody else? I can balance it out a little bit more here. Yeah, I mean, that's the piece, or at least those are my thoughts on the sort of searching for, or using your email to search for, to confirm relevance before you're going in for the kill. So Noah, I hope that answers your question. If you're jumping into a call to action on, hey, let's jump on a call tomorrow at 8, you're definitely jumping the gun. You're proposing, in Celia's analogy, you're proposing on the first date, right? And you want to slow play this one a little bit more. I know the time compressed, right? Because most people aren't sort of proposing from like, I've met you, and then in a 21-day window. So like, if you sort of map that the lifetime, like you want to warm them up a little bit before you go in for asking for a commitment. Paula in chat is asking, hi, any ideas on subject lines for cold emails to get a referral from a C-level to the company's maintenance manager? Paula, I'd love to know, what's the context here? Tell us more about the service and what you're offering. My first question, Jonathan, Celia, what do you think? Are you going to go to, I'm imagining this in an industrial sort of context.
Manufacturing.
Yeah, like manufacturing. I went to like logging, but immediately. maybe that's just me imagining things. What are your thoughts on like, are you going to go to a C-level for this, for somebody who's for a maintenance manager? So targeting, do we have the right targeting in place first?
It depends. Like I think about, we have a bunch of clients targeting like industrial and manufacturing around plant management and reducing downtime and things. So, there's a big difference between, say, the maintenance manager at, maybe a school versus a manufacturing plant that produces hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue each year, right? So if that person is responsible for machinery, where if it goes down, all of a sudden we're losing $1 million a day, then yeah, the CEO probably cares about, that a little bit more, right? So I think it really depends on what the solution is. But even then, it seems like it's almost more of like at the operational side, like a COO or somebody like that.
Perfect. And just for context, Celia, I know you're going to jump in here, but Paulo is saying we're offering maintenance software in Latin America. So I'm guessing this has to do with like maintenance schedules, because if we're looking at a factory, the equipment in that factory, like you basically want it running generally as much as you can. You buy these big $1 million machines, but they've got to get serviced. And when you take them down for servicing, they can't actually produce. They're not producing the value that you pay for them. And so people generally just try and run them 24/7. So you get the most out of the most ROI. And so if you're going to a maintenance manager, anyway, sorry, let me pass it to Celia. What are your thoughts on how would you get the attention of a maintenance manager to sell them some software, some maintenance software?
I'm just wondering if they are going to be the buyer. Like, will they actually be the decision maker for that? Because listening to sort of what you said about it too, Colin, if it's impacting, ROI or operations or anything like that, C-level is where you want to go. And generally they will be the ones making the decision on that, because it's software too. You could always consider it going to the CTO, the CIO. So I'm wondering if you're shooting too low with the target in general. Like, I think C-level would generally be where you would want to be going with that.
And she was saying they want to get a referral from the C-level, like CEO, COO. I wonder if CFO might have a say in certain organizations. And I don't know how she's saying she's selling into Latin America. So I'm not sure if like the types of manufacturing, or if they're like the types that are structured the way that I'm thinking. But if it's a large company with multiple factories, that's going to be a much different context than if it's just one company, one factory, or one company and a couple of factories in a localized region. So maybe you can provide us some context there. But I almost wonder if there's a CFO approach here where you could go and say, because like if we're thinking about the machines, it comes down to uptime, which comes down to ROI and return on the machines. And it's going to be, I imagine the software is going to be helping with something along the lines of sort of balancing uptime and maintenance. And maintenance is what you have to do. And if you don't maintain your equipment, it's going to fail. And that failure is going to cost you X dollars. So if you frame it up that way, if you're taking that approach, it's almost a CFO. But there probably is like, I'm guessing that's the CEO, CFO approach, or you're going to go, if it's a workflow software, I'd be maybe more thinking about going for the COO, because they're going to run operations and they're probably connecting they're the person that connects all the facilities together. And so it's more along the lines of like an operational efficiency, save X time kind of thing. So Paula, let us know in chat, any context. You can go ahead, Celia.
Just playing into what you're saying, like we've definitely worked with clients in the same sort of space before, and that's sort of how we've broken it up, is like COOs, CEOs, and CFOs for money, and then COOs for efficiencies, operations, maintenance, all of that type of thing. So you would almost want to consider creating some separate campaigns and really fine-tuning what you're trying to say to get to the right person.
Love the comment on like separating those and with like different value props. John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is in an industrial context, or
I think so.
Is it more broad?
Well,
yeah.
So Paulo was saying she's selling to manufacturers in Latin America.
Okay, perfect. So if you think about manufacturing, I'm just going to steal a bunch of insight from a client that does something relatively similar. Celia will know who I'm talking about pretty quick here. Manufacturing makes their they have very slim margins, right? And they don't always have a lot of control over the price of the goods that they are purchasing, like the components, or necessarily what the end sale price of the product is, right? You're a manufacturer for Walmart. Walmart says, we're going to sell these for this much money. And you go, yes, Walmart. Thank you, Walmart. And unless you're a massive manufacturer, you're not necessarily getting a significantly discounted cost of those goods, right? So the only factor that you have control over is the efficiency of the operation of your manufacturing plant. So what they really care about is like, how do we increase, so you're telling the story of you need to increase your margins through operational efficiency. And then, a barrier to that is if you're running into all this unplanned downtime and things. So for them, it's about margins, a bit profit. And then you get pointed towards the person who is responsible for that. That's what's going to get their attention. It's like, how does it impact our margins?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Paula was just mentioning that we're currently going to mid to big size companies with multiple locations. So John, you're probably right on with your advice there. I love how you how you've kind of broken it down there. Oh, and I lost my spot. I had some
client.
What's that? Go ahead.
It's stole it all from a client, so it's great.
Well, I mean, and so much of this is like, Paula, please make sure you test this out. But I think segmenting it, like to Celia's point, and then John's to like that operational efficiency angle there is going to be super critical. So we've got Paula's, everybody's saying, so now I've caught up to the no emojis. Tony, poop emoji, love that. Been seeing it recently with the hand wave text. Oh, so Big Skinnies was seeing, we were talking about subject lines with emojis, been seeing like the sort of hand wave in there. Let's see. So Randy, any best practice with subject lines in a drip series to help click-through rates increase by recognition or repetitiveness? So I think, what Randy's, the context, and Randy, correct me if I'm wrong here, but what you're saying is like sort of repeating a similar message sort of across an entire drip campaign. But if I pull it up a level, Celia, how many kicks at the can are you getting? Like, how many emails are you using in a sequence here?
So originally we started with about 7 messages. That's too many. So generally we do about 4. So are we talking about switching the subject line per email?
Yeah, subject lines in a drip series to help click-through rate. So help increase your click-through rate because they're recognizing the subject line, or it's sort of a repetitive message.
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I generally do is I'll keep the subject line in the first 3 messages, generally the same. And for the last one, I might say something like last message, last one. If you start breaking up those subject lines, I mean, just based on the way that I do it, the message comes in underneath the previous message. So it's all in the same chain. So if we start breaking up those subject lines, it's breaking up the messages. So if you're writing a sequence where in your first message, it's kind of like a soft opening, your second message, you're doing like a body with a lot of information, et cetera, there's no recognition because it's completely broken up. So I like to keep things the same throughout, subject line wise.
Perfect. Chat, before we go to John, chat, let me know, do you thread all of your replies or all of your cadences sequences? Do you thread them all, or do you have different subject lines for each? I think there's a case for doing one versus the other. But in my opinion, I probably, unless I'm doing it intentionally, I want to send something sort of intentionally outside that chain, I'm probably going to use the same subject line from start to finish, and it's just going to be re. So you're achieving that sort of the repetitiveness. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I was just looking at a pod, like a multi-channel SDR sequence recently, and that was kind of the approach that we took. So the first 3 emails were probably about the same, and then the next one was a totally different subject line, and maybe that continued on for a couple of emails, and then we got towards the end and it was just something totally out of left field, like I don't know, when you come up for air or something like that was the subject line. Just, something that's completely different from what you were doing at that point. If your subject, if you're writing your first subject lines right, and you should be testing multiple ones and refining that over time, but it should be quite relevant to the person, right? And so if your next shift is maybe something else that's quite relevant to the person, and if they still haven't gotten back to you, then you're kind of throwing something in from left field where you're just trying to get their attention, right?
Yeah.
But if you're doing a good job of getting precise of what they care about, then I would think that you would tend to just repeat that subject repeatedly in this thread.
Gotcha. And it's such a good piece here. It's like, I think the spirit of this is right on, in that you want to be trying different approaches, but I think you want to do it in sort of like burst mode. And there's the sort of 3 touches on this one subject, or on this one sort of idea, and the subject line, the body, and the click and the call to action all kind of support that. And you're hitting them with these little bursts of, okay, let's see if this is relevant to them right now. And in my mind, I'm not thinking of a prospect as sort of one and done. I'm thinking this is an individual that, unless they tell me to go away, this isn't relevant, I'll never buy from you, and they're explicit about opting out, or they sort of opt out of the messaging, I'm still going to be trying different ways of reaching them, right? I'm going to be looking for, okay, well, to go back to the relevancy piece, right? You look at the sort of broad market, and you send a campaign, so you send it to 50 people, and 45 of them don't get back to you. You can assume that those 45 hate you, and because you sent them a cold email and now they're sitting there and they're mad at you, or you can assume that they didn't see it, or you can assume that they saw it, but it just wasn't relevant to them right now. And they're like, it's interesting, but it's not interesting enough to reply right now. And I like to think that the bulk of people are probably in those second 2 groups. There's probably the thing, I think the reason why I think that it's mostly it's my initial reaction is, it's all the first group, is because those are the people you hear from. Those are the people that are going to send you a picture of them holding a baseball bat going like, go away. And yes, I did actually get that reply once in the early days. I think that was one of the ones that started our like sassy replies Slack channel. Because we've got a channel of all the best sort of replies. But it's way too easy to just assume that everybody, you send 50 emails and now they hate you. And that's totally not the case. They probably didn't see it. That's like, I think the bulk of the cases is they didn't see it, they didn't read it. And then there's going to be a number of people that read it and they didn't find it was a tool that would help them get something done or accomplish their goal today, this week, this month. And so I'm assuming that, I want to be pleasantly persistent, and I'll try a different angle at a different point in time, a different period in their life. And so it's about sort of, I'm kind of pulling it up a level. I'm looking not just at the subject line, but I'm saying it's burst mode. You want to stick to the same general idea as opposed to being sort of scattershot, because like Randy is saying, you want to build some of that repetition, and you want it to be one conversation about the same thing as opposed to 3 different sort of ADD conversations in a short period of time. That would be my approach. John, I know I rambled for a little bit there. What are your thoughts there? I see you nodding.
Yep. No, same thing. Yeah, I'm with you there.
Cool. All right. Let's look here we've got a bunch of chat. We've got some emails to look through here. I want to make sure we get through everybody's comments in chat. But John, I do see your note about looking at people's emails shortly. So Renee is coming back to the finance industry. Any tips on cold email subject lines for an employee portal intranet to entertain during the budgeting season for next year's projects? So Renee's selling a corporate intranet employee portal to the finance industry. John, why don't you open this one up?
Ooh, intranet's hard. That's a tricky one. I'm just trying to think back. We had a client in that space, and I think finance, healthcare were actually where we had the most success with them. So that's a positive. But what were we using as a subject line? People aren't excited necessarily by the word like intranet or employee portal. So I think you really have to get, Colin talk about the kind of problem space versus solution space. I think you really need to get into the problem space for this, because they, unless they're a really small company, they have something, right? It might not be ideal, but they probably have some kind of intranet, some kind of employee portal of some sort, especially if you're talking about like decent sized banks. So what is most likely to be wrong with that? Is there somewhere where you could get data about what product they're actually using? A lot of data suppliers have technology searches that have, varying degrees of accuracy. But I would probably try, if possible, to break it down by the technology that they're using and have some kind of a talk track with script that is appropriate for each of those. So that you can come in and say, highlight something that isn't working well, and then kind of build that out through your email. To tackle like intranets or employee portals generally, there's so many and there's so much variety between them that it would be very difficult to come to a conclusion of what is like a common problem across all of them.
Cool. What are your thoughts, Celia?
Yeah, I kind of agree with just taking that sort of route with it. That really isn't something that I've had a lot of experience with, so I'm kind of leaning on John for that.
Yeah, I think it's fair to sort of, it's maybe it's impossible to know without Renee jumping in here. They also do healthcare, so like that's probably something a little bit, I don't know. Like I think there's two angles, right? That I would take, and one is like obviously COVID has had an impact on the hospitals. So like how has that made your product more relevant, right? Like how can you attach yourself to something that's changed in their business? And I'm not saying that you need to say, oh, we solve COVID or we do this or that, but I think understanding from a product level, from a business level, it's changed things. All right, specifically in healthcare, probably pretty significantly. So like how have those changes impacted the people's day to day? And then how can your product, solve that? And so that's what I would look at if you're going into healthcare. And then on the financial industry side, like, while you don't want to tackle COVID, I would be curious about COVID's impact on just work in general in an office environment. A lot of people are now remote. And if you're thinking, well, how can I bridge the gap between, we don't have an office anymore? Is that something that you can sort of attach yourselves to? It's like, we're not the intranet anymore. We're the digital office. Right. And I think it totally depends on your product, but that's that sort of digital office approach where you're looking at you're looking at the gaps in their life. You're looking for those like real world, what's tangible and relevant to me right now. And it's probably this is one of those times where like intranet is a tough sale. It's a huge rip and replace. You got to train your whole company. And if you want to go after a meaningful sale of thousands of users, that's 1,000 people that go to this one spot hopefully every day for something that the IT team or whoever it is that rolls it out is going to have to retrain all those people. So like it's a huge pain in the butt sale because it touches every customer. It's probably a little bit more sticky because it touches every employee. But if you can add something to, hey, this is maybe it is a rip and replace from like an old Microsoft SharePoint, something or other, and you can take that angle of, this digital office, this is how it's relevant. That's probably where I would start the conversation. This is to build on what Jonathan was saying. This is absolutely one of those, you want to stay in the problem space as opposed to the solution space pieces. Unless you're getting, and I don't know your product at all. I haven't seen it. Maybe I'll check the comments here, but unless it's specifically, building on like, oh, it's a Microsoft SharePoint XYZ. We nailed it on Intranet. It is tough. Fantastic feedback. Appreciate. Solid. Unless it's a highly, highly technical thing that works specifically in a certain way with a specific type of intranet, like say, I think SharePoint is one of the ones that does something like this. And if it works specifically with, a technical buyer for a technical reason jumping into SharePoint, then I might reference it. But otherwise I'd be way up at the 40,000 foot view of looking down on, we're stuck in the problem space, not the solution space. So Renee, is that helpful? And she's saying, yes, it is. Fantastic. Let me think here. Also, Laura's part of the blah, blah, blah. Awesome. Okay. So Mara is letting me know that Laura was on the last live stream and said her open rates are higher and she's getting more engagement. So she wants to do a new review of the template she's using. Oh, awesome. So one of the times we did this last, we had Laura Wilkerson from Buzzboard, and we we made some modifications to her email, or we made some suggestions, and now she's getting higher response rates and more engagements and wants us to do another review. So I think this would be a really great way to transition this, and I'll come back to chat. So if there's questions, I made it as far as Renee's, and just the one that just after Caesar Cruz's dabbing emoji, which I'm not gonna do. But John, why don't we start with Laura's, and yeah, let's go from there.
Sure.
I think, did I see Laura hanging out here already? Where are you, Laura? So John's going to share a screen. So can you, basically, I'll set the table here. Laura was here last month when we did this. We gave her some feedback. She's told Mero that she's getting some really good feedback, or some much better engagement. And so now this is our opportunity to just, take our next iteration on this email. So I'm going to take a step back. John and Celia, thoughts on this email here?
Yeah, so just for some context, Buzzboard is essentially a platform where they gather a lot of information about, technology, hiring, advertising spend, a whole bunch of different points about SMBs that you can then access very quickly, so that you can have, more informed marketing campaigns, sales calls, etc. So when I was looking at this earlier, I think one shift that I would look at making is, if you look at this kind of second paragraph here, it's good that there's a lot of data, but this doesn't necessarily mean a lot to me if I'm prospecting, for example. So let's say if I look at the context of what we do, predictable revenue, okay, it's a big data set. That's great. But what are some examples of the things that this can provide me? And I know on your website there's some good case studies, or not, case studies, or just like some verbiage about the granularity that you can provide. Like if you actually, I guess what I would ask for Laura is, because you have a bunch of different personas you can target, what persona is this one aimed at? Mm-hmm. Is this more towards demand gen, inside sales? There's a few areas. But I would then focus on providing examples that are relevant to that persona. So for me, if I'm thinking about building a list and you tell me that I can source by, just right from the website, basically, companies that are using Salesforce with X revenue who have 10 open hiring positions right now. So I know they're kind of going through fast growth and they have like these other stats that are maybe hard to find. And I can just see that, click through those as options and have this much more focused list. That's interesting to me. And that's much more interesting than knowing that, you have 24 million businesses and, tons of different data signals. So it's like, how do you paint that picture for that person of how they would use it?
I'm wondering, like, in terms of an email sequence, when is this being sent? Is this a current email that you're using? And what has your response been from it as well? Or is this just like a brand new thing? But I agree with John in terms of that little section of the...
The thing that's most frustrating about outbound, unless you're doing like hyper-personalized ABM stuff, is there's these broader nets that we cast where we capture a lot of people who aren't relevant. And so if I can significantly reduce the amount of people that I'm kind of wasting outreach to by having these really particular data points and being able to segment very precisely around that, that makes my job so much easier. All right. And if I'm an SDR manager, that makes that means my team is going to convert more deals because we're more relevant more of the time because our targeting is better. So it's really those things that I would kind of hone in on as opposed to this broader perspective of what it is.
Yeah.
Totally. And just to build on what you were saying about the 24 million small, medium-sized businesses, I agree. I like to think about it as like, what's the value of a sale here, right? And any additional word, so it's like a risk factor, right? Like any additional word that you add in here reduces the number of people that are going to read your email, and which reduces your chance of actually making a sale through outbound. And so let's say, put whatever value on it that you will. I like to use the idea in my head, the mental model of like each word costs me $1,000 in future close revenue. Every extra superfluous word, can't believe I said that right, that you add in the email costs you $1,000, right? And so if I'm a salesperson, I want to send the lowest cost email that still gets the job across, because the more words you have, the more attention it requires for them to get the general idea. And so you don't want to dilute the message. So I think you could probably still kill some words here. I would probably kill that whole paragraph. And then the first thing I noticed that I always look at when I look at an email is, how many calls to action do you have? How many calls to action are in this email? And Stacy is pointing out in chat that the time request is 20 to 30 minutes. It's probably too long for an initial call. You're not asking a question. You got to have a question mark, probably one question mark in there. That's my 2 cents. What are your thoughts on Celia, on the call to action here without the question mark? Maybe I'm just old school. In chat, let me know. Would you always have, end your email with a call to action with a question mark, or are you comfortable with something that's a little more passive? But I'll throw it to Celia, and then we'll go to John, and then we'll see what chat has to say.
I mean, I'm not against not having a question mark. Generally, I tend to sort of always have it because it sort of draws your eye to it, leaves you with the impression that you should be responding. Again, I'm just wondering, where is this like a first email being sent out to someone? Because if so, then I would probably drastically change it.
So if you were gonna change this one up, maybe let's go to John, and then we'll see how you would change this one. Mm-hmm. John.
Yeah, absolutely. So just expanding on my point of kind of segmenting it a little bit more. So let's say this is to like an SDR manager or something. Their pain point is that a lot of their SDR's outreach is going to be to people that aren't relevant because they don't have the ability to segment it super hard. So, if my call to action might be something along the lines of, would reducing the amount of irrelevant prospects that your SDRs reach out to help you achieve whatever business outcome you kind of want to focus on. I think by segmenting this to those different personas, demand gen, inside sales, outside sales, and et cetera, you can just get more precise, more specific about what that individual person cares about, as opposed to this broad picture. And then you can ask those like really specific questions where well, obviously that would help with this, but you've painted how that could happen for them, and you maybe frame that in that way of that loss aversion of, just what would reducing the number of irrelevant people. So you're focusing on this bad thing that's happening, is that they're reaching out to all these irrelevant people, as opposed to just saying, it can increase the accuracy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's work on one with Harshdeep, because he offered a suggestion. So let's work on this and see how he offered a suggestion. And so let's see how you would you take his recommendation, or would you change it a little bit? So I'll read it to you now. Would you be open to a 15-minute brainstorm where we can come up with how we can help your team be a perfect fit? Oh, and be a perfect fit.
I think it depends on how specific the rest of the body is, right? I've been leaning towards lately having more precise questions, because you could tag that onto almost any email, right? Where you're trying to remind them of the specific positive outcomes. So if we're gonna take an approach like that, I would tag on what is the specific outcome that you're gonna help them with, as opposed to keeping it, more broad, like a perfect fit, that kind of thing.
Cool. What are your thoughts, Celia?
Yeah, I agree with John.
Cool. The one sort of iteration, if I was going to go with a more generic, open-ended call to action like this, is you're asking two things, right? Like you're saying, 15 minutes. So you're asking for 15 minutes where we can come up with how we can help your team and to be a perfect fit. So you're like this and this, right? If you're going to go with something a little bit more generic here and general in that it's not tuned specific to the individual, I would make sure you're just asking one question. So not this and this. Can we do this and this? Can we do this, right? When you're going for times, hey, can we do Tuesday at 4 or Monday or Thursday at 2, right? That's super helpful. But when you're going for the call to action of like, do you have time here to do this? You want to make sure that this is exceptionally specific. Does that make sense? Harsh, let me know in the chat if that's if we're sort of leading you in the right direction. I definitely appreciate the chat here or your participation in chat. So chat, let me know any other comments, thoughts on Laura's email. Anything else we can do to help her with before we move on? Because I know we've got Stacy's in the chat had also shared an email with us that we're going to get to, and since she's here, we're just going to be savage. And then Celia, I know you had another. I can't remember if we covered this here. I'm trying to read too many things and keep my eyes on the conversation. Anything else to add to Laura's email here?
No, I mean, like I said, if this is the first email, I wouldn't be asking for a call in general. I think it needs to be a little bit more specific. I agree with basically the points that John's already mentioned. Just removing all of those, just like 24 million small, 127 APIs, like just putting something that might matter to them more than just giving a lot of information. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much it.
So Laura's saying she's going after digital marketing agencies. And one of the most interesting pieces that you mentioned here is that you can print or email customer-facing reports and show them exactly why and how they need their help. And how they stack up against their direct competition. That seems like a pretty sweet aha moment that's buried in the third paragraph.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a way that you could show, like, get me to that magic moment. How do you show me that piece? How do you help me see that? Because that seems like a pretty awesome piece. All the stuff about Buzzboard and 24 million, I don't care, right? What's in it for me? Right. I think back to John's sort of initial, I can't remember where you had it in the slides, but it's like, what's in it for me? Why should I care?
If you could follow up with like a point on, I took a quick look at your site and I can show you this and that, or just like give them an example of like a case study or something like that in a follow-up message, I think it would really hit home more. I think that second paragraph should just be removed entirely.
Awesome. We're killing some words. Sean is saying he's brave enough. He's got an email that he'd love for us to rip apart. Awesome. Cool.
And is Kieran on here? I know he was one of the first, or he or she were the first people to submit
Let's have a look.
An email for this.
I haven't seen Kieran in chat, but Kieran, if you're there, let us know. We'll definitely make sure we get to your request. Cool. I can just type their name, but while we do, why don't we, Kieran, not seeing him. So we'll get to theirs. We can save theirs for a little bit here. Let's get to Stacy's because Stacy's hanging out with us, and we'll get Mero to load up Sean's in there so we can start making fun of Sean real quick here. All right.
Cool.
Stacy, thank you for being brave. So
Brief moment of silence while we read it.
Totally. I was curious if your company's title is your company's title. Are you using or reviewing GPS tracking? Yes, I can read without talking, but
yeah. First thing I'd say is it's probably a good length.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have the concise thing nailed.
Yeah,
so
that
you go
first
first.
line, I think that first line is great. I think with the like let me know part, you could definitely cut a few words from that, but like that first line, great. That's how I feel.
The subject line is company, so company name, accident videos plus GPS. Very cool. So SureCam, it's basically, so it's like it's dash cams, but for fleets. Very cool. I could see how that would be super helpful and pretty relevant. Stacy, what types of fleets are there particular types of fleets that you're selling to? out of curiosity here? And Paul saying PS are my secret weapon. 100%. Love it.
PS are great.
Yeah. There are so many times where I'm like, I don't have a room for this in the body. I'll throw it in a PS. And I've had like multiple PSs to the point where the PS is longer than the body. And that's probably excessive. But at least it creates that sort of, it doesn't muddle the clarity of your message, right? And if they're looking at it, say on your phone, and they're like, oh, you get the preview text that's this long, you see that, the signature, then if they decide to click on it, then you've sort of, it's like all these appendices. Like, if this is relevant to you, I'm going to just load on all of these. So Stacy is saying, we're a great fit for small, medium-sized fleets that don't have electronic driver logging requirements. Okay, so imagine there's some sort of, there's some industries that need to have like, is that like a full GPS tool? I guess you're doing GPS tracking anyway. Mm-hmm. All right, Celia, if we had to destroy Stacy and her confidence in this email kindly, how would you do it? What are some of the changes that you would make?
I mean, like I said, I think that the first opening line is great. Starting off with a question like that is a really good way to catch someone's attention, especially if that's literally what the email is about. I think that's really smart. Yeah, I mean, like for me, the only thing that really sticks out that I'm just being super nitpicky is just that let me know if there's someone on your team who oversees, like you could cut that down into like 4 words. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, I don't hate it. So I have nothing to rip apart here.
High praise from Celia.
That's what? Like 10. That's 10 out of 10 from Celia.
I don't hate it. That's good. I
don't hate it.
I'm willing to be a little meaner than Celia, though.
Yes. It's still Vancouver mean, so at most it's passive aggressive.
Yeah, Canada mean, right? Yeah. So I would say it's too much about SureCam, right? There's a lot of we. There's not really a lot of you. If you think about, all right, so you think about what your prospect cares about. They care about themselves, not you. They care about their problem, not your company. And they need to be able to visualize or have an emotional reaction to what you're writing. So the conciseness is great. I think starting with questions can be really effective, depending on the question. But then from there, I don't know if it's compelling, right? So, you kind of, I think, need to pose to them, like, what is the ramification of them not having something like this in place? Does it make them more liable for certain damages? Do they have a harder time justifying or defending claims? What is the thing what is the consequence of this not being in place for them? Mm. So because a lot of companies probably provide GPS tracking and fleet video capabilities. So it's like, how do you either differentiate, and then also how do you get closer to that pain? So I think in a previous, actually, I've got slides. Give me a quick second here.
Oh, cheater.
Is does means. So I think you're stuck kind of in this does side of thing. So what is this? No one really cares what your solution is. They care a bit about what it does. They really care about what it means for them. And so one example that I'd used, Reactin, Zyrtec, whatever it is where you are, it's an allergy medication. It is chemically cetirizine hydrochloride. What it does, it helps reduce allergy symptoms. Okay, that's like not too bad. What it means is not feeling like you're going to die at your friend with a cat's house, or avoiding dirty looks at the grocery store because people think you have COVID, right? So we need to get to that. I think you're kind of in that second stage of what it does, but what does that actually mean for your prospect? Like why should I be compelled to take action right now? And if it's so that I don't get sued to oblivion and my company crumbles, that's compelling. Or various kinds of things like that.
Good feedback. I love, and this is where, everybody, like, we don't trust anybody. We bring data. And so 100% one that would be awesome to test this out. for whatever reason, like we've had a couple customers that went after these individuals, like fleet managers, small to medium sized fleets. We've gone after them a couple of different angles for a couple of different reasons. I'd love to test out the sort of minimalist approach here, and just like cue them up with the curiosity. I agree with Celia. I love that question. Was curious if you're using, GPS tracking or dash cams for your fleet. I'd nuke that second sentence. And then, so you could either just leave it at that, best Stacy, and just go like crazy. What's her name? The minimalist lady from Netflix. She wrote a book.
Marie Kondo.
Marie Kondo. There we go.
Kondo.
I'm going to challenge my inner minimalist here, and just go with that, just that question signature. Then what you could do is I would modify your PS to incorporate some of the social proof from that second, from the second paragraph. So instead of like our rental program was featured in Fleet Week, read more about it here. I'd probably, I'd probably say like something along the lines of like, is there some stat? So being mentioned in Fleet Week is awesome. Instead of like read more about it here, I would hyperlink. You know what? I probably actually wouldn't hyperlink it. I would just use the raw link, just because I'm afraid of spam filters. And if you're sending this to a whole bunch of people at once, I've heard HTML can, in some cases, set off spam filters. So like when I say HTML, I mean like, see how she's hyperlinked. You can read more about it here, where you highlight that and you go Control K, or you add link and then you paste the link in. That's HTML. And stuff like that can, but is not guaranteed to increase your likelihood of hitting spam filters. And again, we're talking about probabilities. I don't know what the probabilities are, what the increase is. But for me, I would probably just leave it as our program is, we were featured in Fleet Week as an up and coming or as a market leader. And then here's, colon, and then the raw link, and just leave it at that. And then you've got a super, super minimalist version of this that you can test. And again, I don't think this is a better version than what Jonathan suggested or even Celia's tweaks. It's just a different approach. And I think the piece here is sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, sometimes we have to be willing to try things that are probably not going to work, because just admitting that we don't know what's going to work, like if I assume that I know what's going to work and I go out there with that assumption, it's going to limit my bubble of the things that I'm willing to test to a very small realm. But if I'm willing to try things that I'm pretty sure aren't going to work, then I'm wide open to things that are like these breakout ideas, the things that are changing, like emojis in the subject lines. Apparently our team is already using them. Maybe us cold emailers are just working off of old data, and that is really the next thing, that you're going to get 110% reply rates and crazy open rates because you send emojis in your emails. So Stacy's saying that's great advice. Thanks so much. You are very welcome. Sandra, good to see you. Thanks for hanging around here. Harsh has sent us another email, and we've got one of Sean's coming up next here. So Stacy, let me know if is there any other questions that you have. We're going to go to Sean's email and have a look at that. And but if there's anything that we missed, or if there's anything that was specific that you wanted us to sort of tear apart, let us know. But Sean, get ready. You're up. And Sean is saying that the subject is Ford loyalty fall/winter 2020. So let's just, John, do we have, I think Meryl said she threw that in the slides there, and I can see it.
I might just need to, one moment. I need to unpresent, and then it will reload properly.
Oh, she's still moving it around. It's okay, Meryl. We'll get there.
Yeah. I have another one we can look at before that if it's still being
No,
on.
it's okay.
Now we're good. All right.
I think it's a longer one, so she was just trying to make it fit. Stacy, before you
watch
jump.
out for Celia then.
Stacy was saying 36% open rate, 5% reply rate. Not sure how, Stacy, what's the context? Like how many people did you send that to? Was that like I sent it to 4, I sent it to 400, I sent it to 4,000. And she's also mentioning that this is the first email in sequence. She's not sure how good that is. Celia, how do you feel about a 5% response rate?
I think that's a great response rate.
If it's not including unsubs.
Dang, 5,400 is what she sent that to. 5,400 people.
5% response rate. I'd be curious to see like percentage of what was like positive, negative.
Yeah. No, I was just agreeing with you vigorously there. Positive, like looking at what is the breakdown of positive, neutral, and negative.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, 5%, that's a great response rate.
One, like, I think Outreach has some tagging abilities, and like we had built a tool that you could do that, but it's not super relevant anymore. One of the things that I'd like to do back before we built our tool was to get a sense for positive, neutral, negative response rates. And one of the things that I did was basically I used a shortcut hotkey ninja, and I don't remember what the hotkeys are anymore. But I had hotkeys. I'd created tags in my Gmail for positive, neutral, and negative. And then the next email key and previous email key are J and K. I think there's another couple of shortcuts. But what I did is I'd search in my Gmail for a unique string of text that would only pull up this particular email. So I would search for like, I was curious if you're blah, 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 are using GPS. Actually, I wouldn't want to do that because it would, with company title in there, you get a variable. But let's say there was a unique string of like 4 or 5 words. I would add that in to my Gmail. I'd search in my Gmail, and I'm pretty sure you can do this in Outlook, but I don't know about the hotkeys. But I would search for that particular piece, and then there are hotkeys for applying, or there's ways of quickly applying labels. And I don't remember, or labels or tags. And then you just go through and you go J, and then whatever the hotkey is, select the label, enter. And you do that for about 100 emails as a spot check. So your 100 most recent emails. And then you just, in that search, what you can see is like, you can see the counts of each of the labels on the left-hand side. And so you can see, oh, well, there was 34 positive and, 64 negative, right? And 0 neutral, right? And so what you want to see is like, what is the breakdown? Because especially when you're going broad like this, even a small tweak can have a huge, huge difference. And if you've got, if you're getting a 5% response rate, but they're all saying, I don't know what this is, or, take me off of your list, or something that's negative, then a 5% response rate isn't really great. But I would say overall, those are impressive looking metrics. My encouragement, or the one thing that to take away from this, in addition to the test, is to get a sense of like, what are those positive, neutral, negative rates? Chat, let me know. How do you determine positive, neutral, negative response rates? Do you use Outreach's tagging feature? Do you do my janky little Gmail trick, Gmail filters trick? Or do you have some other secret? And if so, let it not be a secret anymore. And VisionBox just sent a cool emoji. It looks like an apple, but I'm old and I don't know what that is. Maybe it's a princess. Anyway, we're getting to the next email here. I think we're ready to look at Sean. Sean, get ready. We're going to be brutal. So he's a regional sales rep at Shift Marketing. And so you're going after, Sean, are you going after Ford? I haven't read the email here. Oh, you're going after dealers. I see what you're saying. All right, let's take a moment of silence so that I can shut up and consume this message here.
I'll let Celia start when she's done. I know what she's going to say.
Okay.
I just, before you jump in, I love we're talking cars, and you made a reference to under the hood. Anybody that can work a good pun into an email or a solid play on words, huge bonus points. So I'll start with that. You get a thumbs up from me. Celia, tear them apart.
I agree with that point though. So this isn't targeting Ford, is it? Is it targeting Ford? Dealerships in general. So I think starting the way it's too long. 2, starting the way it's starting, it almost comes off as you're targeting Ford. Like there's a lot of
Ford dealerships.
Ford. Oh, okay. Well then, yeah, I guess that's fine. Still too long. Give me
What
another.
would you cut out? Yeah, okay, give me a sec. Cool. So yeah, I think great. You have a ton of proof in this market that you can create value. I'm just not sure if you're communicating it as effectively as it could be. So somewhere in this email, yeah, the fact that you worked with 104 dealers in the past year, that's awesome. What did you, I think you need to include, like I haven't gone to these links and there's probably a lot of interesting content in those, but somewhere in this email, probably near the front and probably near where you make that statement about working with 104 dealers in the past year, you need to provide like a really tangible outcome that you created for them. So if I'm familiar, our award-winning team produces a handful of effective database marketing solutions designed to engage existing clients to help sell new vehicles. So, hey, we worked with 104 dealers in the past year. We were able to help them increase new vehicle sales by like X% and, re-engage existing clients for upsells or trade-ins or whatever by this. You can see an example of a few of our, the campaigns that we've done. And then having that last paragraph be, more concise, keep me under the hood fun. But I think that could be more concise and probably be a little more like have a question. Lots of no question marks lately, which is interesting. Not necessarily bad, but it's interesting that a bunch of these have kind of had that. So TLDR, pull out the value that you're creating as opposed to just relying on the fact that you have worked with so many other dealerships. And then I might click the links and then expose myself to more of that value.
Perfect. My first take on this is you've got the kid in a candy store problem, in that there's so many options to choose from, you didn't pick one. And so my comment here is you need to go deep. You need to pick sort of one killer use case to start with. Because I don't know, Sean, I see you in chat. Can you let us know what persona are you sending this to? Like what type of individual is this? Is this the owner of a dealership? Is this a sales manager, marketing, operations manager? Is this the owner? Let us know, because I think that adds some context. And so I think to Celia's point, it's absolutely too long. Paul is asking, or no, sorry, it wasn't Paul. Who was it? Somebody was asking if Big Scanny was asking, does having this many hyperlinks reduce deliverability? I think the sales loft research shows that it does. That you can your quota, your allotment is one hyperlink per email before it starts to impact deliverability. That's sales loft research. Celia?
I was just going to say, I think if this is like an initial email as well, when you're sending it to a cold contact and you've got a ton of links like this in there, you can almost definitely expect to go into spam.
Totally. Well, and just the fact that like to my previous comment about the last email is you want clarity on the call to action, right? If you think about, there's a book, and I wouldn't recommend reading it as a sales book, but there's a book called The Design of Everyday Things. And if you're able to pick, I think you can read on Google, like just the first chapter, and it talks about the design of your thermostat, right? And it talked about, if you look at your thermostat, what a common use case is, a lot of people, when they want it to get hot really fast, they turn it all the way up to max. And then once it gets up to temperature, they turn it back down to the temperature that they want. And whether it's, in your car or the one that I'm staring at on my wall. And then the question they ask is, well, does turning it up to max heat, or to that, the maximum it goes, does that actually heat up the room any faster? Right? Or would it be the same? And it's not implied when you look at the device, but this is a super random and long walk to get to my point of, you want to make it really obvious what it is that they need to do with this email. And with this, when you include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 links, plus I bet you got a link or two in your signature, you seem to be addicted to links, HTML-itis, I guess. Like there's no way somebody's going to click on 5 links, right? Just by presenting them, you're making them make a decision, which is, which of these 5 links? So if I am interested in your email, which of these 5 links should I click on? You want to make it super, super, super simple and straightforward. And we've got a couple of people asking about deliverability. GIFs and images can impact deliverability, specifically if they're over a certain size. I've seen them firsthand. I haven't done any testing, but I've seen them drop the deliverability if they're over a meg. This was a few years ago. I haven't done any testing. So sidebar, Celia, John, any recent data on, on images or GIFs?
I think emails are more, like email providers are more accepting of them now. And I know people get a lot of success. It's one of those things where like, if you have one, it's probably okay. If you have a lot, so there's this like, there's this ratio of like regular text to links and other types of content. And if it's too overwhelming towards like the link side or the other content, I think that's where you start to run into these deliverability challenges. I think there's like some kind of ratio component to it.
Totally. And it probably has an impact on it. They're probably also looking at your reply rates, like the engagement rates. So like if you're getting great responses, if the GIF or if the image is super, super relevant, that's great. If it's a follow-up and it's the Cookie Monster doing this, that like where he's just like tapping his fingers, then, it's probably not going to help. Luke says, yo, hey, Luke. Melrose, if you had to deconstruct this email and just add one link to limit the options, how would we do that? And so I think that's a great question. I think the place or the piece that I would look at is Sean needs to make the decision. What angle am I? What's the angle of attack here, right? Like, what foot do I want to present first? And so I would look at specifically who you're going after and say, and I think he replied to me. We had asked him. He did a blast targeting the GSM, the GM, dealer principal at each store. So it's each store individually. So yeah, I'd probably segment those out because I imagine the use cases are probably a little bit similar, but I would just pick one. And I don't think I would.
Shop at home.
Yeah.
I'm looking at them. So
you're deep in there.
Oh yeah.
So like so let's pick the shop at home one because that seems to be the most timely and relevant. I would probably say like, how do I use the body to set up, this is, you need to click on this link. So, that's probably how I would look at it.
Yeah, there's this problem that exists right now in a lot of retail environments of people are obviously not going in person to places as much as they used to for shopping and purchases, right? So I think you have a really strong message around, this shop at home premise. So you can either have that like very like much in the beginning, like, hey, you know what? I wouldn't necessarily say COVID happened, people aren't coming to dealerships, but there's some variation of that I think is really salient. And then you kind of tie in how, we've worked with 104 dealers in the past year, and even through these turbulent times, we've been able to help them generate revenue, hit targets, et cetera, by leveraging campaigns like shop at home events or et cetera. And so you could probably make this down into like 5 or 6 sentences in the most, and you can have that one kind of consistent theme, that one piece of collateral. It's a one-pager. I love one-pagers. And it's this particular problem that they're trying to work through, and especially as we go into the fall, right, where cases are going to, it's all been one wave in the States, sorry, but as we're going to the second wave in Canada, this is going to become even more salient again, right? So I think that's probably the one to focus on.
Because there was also something like I saw that car sales were up in the pandemic because people were taking less public transit, which makes a lot of sense. And so they probably are doing a lot more shop at home. So we're tying it to like something that's super relevant. You got a big trend, a big, something that's happening. And you're trying to show, so Sean's trying to show your prospect, hey, this is why you need to pay attention to this right now. Does that make sense? Industry, main problem. Inventory is the main problem with dealers right now. Yeah. As a dealer, that's a great problem to have. So like, I guess, so if that's the case, how do we make your product a little bit more relevant, right? Like if they're running low on inventory, then what might be valuable is pre-orders, right? And like getting them customized. And so that shop at home piece, there might be an element there. So I'll ask chat, and it looks like we had, I don't know, YouTube must have featured us. We had put us on a bunch of recommended pages. We had a bunch of people jump in that weren't expecting sales content, but for chat that is expecting sales content, how would you change this? What do you think of his call to action? Can you find his call to action? Because I'm curious. It's looking like, and Sean, maybe you can let us know the approach here, but, is the plan to get them to click on that link, and then the next email in this sequence is the call to action is going for this?
Well, I mean, right at the bottom, it's like, if you want to learn more and or discuss, I would say that would probably be the main call to action here. It's like shoved right in there at the end.
Yeah. And fair. And so maybe this is some feedback for Sean. Like I'm giving it the executive scan. So Sean wants to book a demo. All right. Like I looked at this, and I know it's kind of spread, like the way we've got it, it's kind of 2 columns. But I couldn't immediately pick out your call to action, and I'm looking for your call to action. So
even if you were going to like do nothing else to this, if you dropped that if you'd like down to, then Colin would have seen it.
Like down to its own independent line?
Yeah. But I wouldn't say just do that. Make it shorter completely.
Mm-hmm. Too many things to do, right? Like I think Colin nailed it with the kid in the candy store, and that was exactly my problem when I first started here. Like my writing background prior to this would have been like academic philosophy or something, where you're like, how do I make this into a 20-page paper, right? And so it took me a long time to really refine that ability to just like focus in, cut a lot of the other stuff, and just get to that message. I do like that your tone is kind of friendly, more casual. I think that's really great. But just shorter, a little more focused, pulling the proof, and then you have that opportunity to make it really salient right now.
Solid. Great feedback. I'm just going to make sure we got Sandra. So we got Sandra up next, and then we'll get to Harsh Deep. So Sean was just saying it needs to be shorter, more specific, one HTML link. Totally agree. And then I think the up one level of that, you've got more specific. So I think that's exactly the takeaways. And don't just go and change your message. I'm gonna repeat this over and over and over and over again. Don't just go and change. Oh yeah, he said, what about the subject line? Where was your subject line again? It's up here. It's up here.
It was Ford Loyalty Fall/Winter 2020.
There you go. I would probably say I think it would depend on, like we talked about getting specific. Yes, you should add emojis. Definitely. It should just be all emojis. Little car, Ford icon.
A truck.
Yeah. What do you think, Celia?
About emojis?
No, the subject line. Should he change his subject line?
I'm not crazy about it, to be totally honest. I think if that was in my inbox, I wouldn't read it. Obviously, I don't work for a Ford dealership, so, but I feel like you could do something that's a little bit more eye-catching than that. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's going to depend on like how specific and like the angle that you take on your email, right? So if you're going to talk to them about the shop at home, I'd make your subject line, you want the subject line, the body, and the call to action to sort of be all aligned in telling the same story. So if it's about the shop at home event, the subject line should sort of hint to that. You don't need to give them all of the information in the subject line, but you want to point them in the direction of, hey, we're going to be talking about this in general. So I want to give you here's how to think about it without actually giving you the words, because I think so much is going to depend on the direction that you take this email. But absolutely email Meryl when you've got your next version of this, and we'll have another look at it, and we can get you on stream when we do this again in a couple of weeks or a month, and we can have a look at how, like, the changes you made, the things you tested, and how it's improved. And so one last thing before you move on, I know I said this already, but I just want to reinforce, test it. Don't just take our word, do an A/B test, and you can queue up and you can have multiple different versions. And I would encourage you to have one that you're uncomfortable with, one that you're like, oh, that's a bad idea. I don't think that's going to work. And just do really small tests, 50 to 100 people tops. If you're personalizing it, then I would do fewer, because you're going to get a better sense in a fewer number of emails. But if you're not personalizing it, then probably 50, 100, you're going to have a really good sense, especially if you're doing the positive, neutral, negative calculations. Mm-hmm. All right. I think we got Sandra up next. I see Sandra in chat. I see that she's still here. Sandra, brace yourself. And for chat, don't forget, hit subscribe if you want to. Like, we do this every Thursday at 10:30 Pacific Standard. We've got some live podcasts coming up, and things that some other things that we're going to be doing. We've got some videos that we're producing that are be a little bit less live, a little bit more me sitting down with the camera talking about the methodology, and so the predictable revenue methodology. And so if you want to make sure you don't miss that, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification icon, and then set it to all so that you get notified for all of the ones, not just the ones that YouTube thinks you want. All right, Sandra, she's here. She needs all the assistance she can get, so she says, and she's ready. She's braced. Let's do it.
Awesome. And our conclusion was that Kieran wasn't in the chat. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Kieran, if you are here, if you did show up, let us know.
Cool. Definitely want to go through the people who are active right now.
All right, moment of silence for Sandra's message, because we're reading and it's about to die.
And so the context of this is nonprofits, right? I'm assuming.
Sandra, yeah, let us know here. She's saying yes. Yeah. For charities. This is funny. I had read coinage as college, and I was hella confused by the rest of the message, because I was thinking she was from Osborne College.
That's what I thought.
Coinage. Yeah.
Like, what?
I'm like, I don't understand any of this. I'm so confused. Again, Sandra, not your fault. She sells coins.
Okay. Got it.
Awesome. Okay. Initial thoughts, just like if I stand back to the point where I can't read it, it's too long. It's way too long. Also, you need a new company name. It looks too much like Osborne College. But maybe that's just me. I'm going to nitpick a couple of things. Honestly, if you opened, so she said we sell coins, I think that'd be a hilarious subject line to test out, because people would be like, what the hell? I don't think it'd be a good one. But again, you gotta do things that are probably not good ideas to find those like breakout ideas.
Emojis of coin.
There you go. There you go. You probably don't need to introduce yourself, because they've seen, one, they can see your signature, two, they can see who it's from. And again, back to it cost you $1,000 per word. You've spent a lot on this email, and it's probably taken away from that core message. And so, Sandra, before I let John jump in here, I'm assuming the core message is, I can see you stretching. You're like, oh, I'm going to roast her.
Just punching for it too much, but I have thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we jump in, if I can just summarize. So basically, you sell coins, as you've said, and the purpose is for direct mail, for charities. So you're going to charities, nonprofits, and you want them to include your coins in their direct mail campaigns. Is that correct? Just let me know in chat. And then to chat, to the rest of you hanging out here, what would you change about Sandra's email other than the company name? We've all already agreed that it should either be Osborne College or a totally different name at all. Honestly, maybe just We Sell Coins for the name. So chat, let me know, what would you change about Sandra's email here? So John, I'll let you jump in.
Sure. So let's go through clear, concise, relevant really quick. Concise. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Yeah, like Colin said, spending a lot of money on the extra words. Clear. Yes, but I don't know if you're positioning it in the most effective way. So if we were to look at the relevance of this to people, you really establish the relevance in the start of the second paragraph. I guess the whole second paragraph. So what they're trying to do as an organization is, increase the rate of return for these types of campaigns that they are running, right? And so that's what they're trying to accomplish. What is the obstacle? The obstacle is that there are a million charities trying to get everybody's money, and a lot of them have great causes, right? So it's difficult to, it's kind of a noisy space, right? There's a lot of competition for donors, and it's hard to make your particular cause stand out against a lot of other really great causes, right? So there's this competitive thing. So how do you bridge that gap? So the way you bridge that gap is you, through basically the psychological principle of reciprocation, right? You are sending them a gift, which makes them more inclined to, return the favor, right? So that's kind of the core concept that you need to connect for them. And you do that, but I think it could be done much simpler. So I would highlight for them the risk that exists around how noisy the space is. Talk about how you have this problem, it's super noisy, you're trying to increase these things. Here's how you can do it. Pretty much the end, I think, kind of at that point, call to action.
The end? Is that how you would sign it off?
The end.
The end.
Yeah. Too many people want the money that you want, and it's hard to stand out. You need to increase the return on these things. We provide coins so that you can do that. Any questions?
Mm-hmm.
Don't say any questions. It's the call to action.
I have a question.
That's my thought. Yeah.
Just a question for Sandra. Are you opening your email with good morning, or is it good morning, Celia? And are you actually sending it in the morning? And then how many people are you sending this to? And then I'll let Celia jump in. So what are your thoughts, Celia?
So, okay. So what I notice a lot lately is people are starting with these opening lines where they are, explaining who they are. It's like Colin said, it's a waste of time. It's just, don't do it. Second paragraph, I don't think that it's very clear, to be totally honest. I feel like that could be simplified so much. Like, as John had mentioned, making the proof of the pain that they're having, how you're helping them get the attention, and that's it. Like, this is way too long. I don't think it's clear. It could be much more concise. That's how I feel about it.
Cool. And so if we were to start rebuilding this, one option would be to start with just straight up asking them, do you, have you ever used coinage in your direct mail, in your fundraising campaigns, right? Like, question mark. If we use that sort of framework that we had talked about earlier, my minimalist version would be, do you ever use coinage, or have you ever used coins or leverage coins, or however you want to frame it, but using coinage for your direct mail fundraising campaigns, question mark, and then signature, well, name, signature, etc. That's the sort of the Marie Kondo version of this. John, how would you, and you had some really good advice here. If we had to distill it down into where would you start with this? So let's give her sort of the starting point, the jumping off point of the template. Where would you start?
Hi, first name.
Yeah, no.
Thanks.
Sure. So once we get past that part, you could pose the next part either as a question or as a statement, but I think you're trying to capture this obstacle of standing out, right? So you're reminding them of what the problem that they have is, say like, oh crap, I do have that problem, right?
Mm.
So it could be a sentence. It could be like, how are you ensuring your direct mail stands out amongst, all the other pieces of that? It could be more of a statement like, especially right now, competition for donor dollars is really intense, right? There are a lot of charities and nonprofits that are really hurting right now, right? So you could kind of increase the salience and the relevancy and kind of like within the context of what's happening in the world. And kind of use that problem as the focal point for the rest of it. I would start with that pain that they're having right now. Direct mail is hard to do really well.
I'm curious, Sandra. Let me know what do you have any data on the use of coins in direct mail that you can share? And like, are there any specific types? Like, do you guys produce a specific type of coin? I'm curious. Yeah, but I think let's start with let us know what kind of improvements have your customers seen from using coinage, other than it costs more because our mail is heavier, which would not be a good subject line. Make your mail heavier.
Yeah, some ROI numbers would be great to back that up.
I think that'd be whether it's ROI or whether it's you don't have data on return rates. What about? Yeah, I mean, that would be something that I would go to my current customers, like, and I know we're talking about sort of like how to write an email here, but if your company doesn't have that data, I'd get some anecdotal data from like, look at the types of charities that you're targeting and then say, okay, well, who are our customers now that are similar to this? And then go have a conversation with them and see if they can give you some anecdotal data. And you don't have to name them and you don't have to do a full case study. But yeah, having being able to put it in your customers' words where you could quote them, even if you don't have permission to share their name, you can say, hey, I was talking to one of my customers the other day about our coinage program and they said XYZ. And it's super interesting that there's a coin shortage happening right now and that their coins are cheaper than a dime or a quarter. We do have the data. And we do have the data on return rates. Okay, so she does. I just misread the emails, or I just misread your chat there. So I'm curious, chat. How would you wrap this coin thing into the email? Where would you thread this in? I think, Sandra, you're giving them a lot of information. One, your name, they already have that, so like we can agree to murder that. Julio had said you need to shorten that paragraph. I totally agree. And then I'm generally not a huge fan of playing to the cost reduction side of things. So because once you I'm going to get to that in a minute. They're adding the data as an attachment. We're going to have a conversation, Sandra. But let's get to that in a minute. Once you're, I totally lost my spot in this email here. Once you're playing to the downside, once you're saying, hey, I can save you X, you set up in their mind that you can only, you're the person that saves the money. And then once you've saved them money, the way you save them more money is they grind you on price. Whereas if you set them up to have more of an abundance mindset towards you, where I can improve your conversion rate by XYZ by putting a cute emoji on one of our coins and emailing it out to people, you're triggering, you can play to the greater side of the equation. And so they think of you as somebody who helps earn them more money. So that would be my comment there, is I probably wouldn't play to the cost saving side, but if that is the number one reason why customers buy from you, then that's your strength. Celia, care to weigh in here?
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same sort of way about it. I think if you're saying, using this can help you do X, Y, and Z, like, how is this going to help you?
Sandra, can you can you paste in like a couple examples? Maybe we can try and work it in for you. Yeah, just let us know in chat. Can you give us an example? Because I'm assuming it's like, oh, it's going to improve your return rates by X.
Yeah. But like so and so is seeing this decline and whatever.
And if you wanted to talk about the cost saving side, if that is the primary reason why customers are buying from you, then I would just ask them like straight up, hey, are you using quarters or dimes in your direct mail campaigns? And then I wouldn't say, hey, we're cheaper. I would just ask that question, and then maybe provide a little bit of context about the company. But you really want that, like if they're not doing it, because if you look at like how that conversation branches out, are you using coins, right? Like, are you suffering from the great coin shortage of 2020? Maybe a silly thing you could try. I doubt it's going to work. But if you ask them if they have coins, then the conversation can go two ways. It's yes, and then you can ask them if they're using like dimes or nickels or quarters or whatever it is, or if they say no, we're not using them, then you can have the conversation about, hey, we can add coins, we can put your logo on them. They look really cool. They improve conversion rates by XYZ. And so you give yourself the optionality in that response rate or in the response to go one direction or the other. And so much of this is going to come down to like how your market is shaped and like what the value that customers tend to get out of your service. But I want to get to Harsh's email next. So any chat or any comments or thoughts in the chat, and do know in about 20 minutes we've got somebody else is gonna join us. I'm trying to blank on his name. It's Jonathan. Sorry, it's not Jonathan. It's Greg. Too many Jonathans here today already. Greg Callahan from Bain Consulting. We're gonna be doing a live podcast, so you can hang out. You don't have to hang out. It's going to be a lot less engagement, a little bit more having a conversation. It is going to make it up on the podcast. It will be up on YouTube afterwards. But if you did want to hang out and pick Greg's brain, then you're more than welcome to do so. I do want to get to Harsh's email before we got to go. But the one last thing that I'm going to say that you can't see in this email that Sandra said in the chat is that she's adding the data as an attachment. And that's a huge deliverability no-no. In addition to like just making it heavier to send all these emails and making it less likely that somebody is going to I'm very rarely going to open an email with an attachment from somebody that I don't know. So that's a huge no-no.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just
rudely interrupt me. That's okay. Go ahead.
I do expect it. You just always want to think too, like in like your own circumstances. You're not going to sit and read an email from someone you don't know that you've got to scroll through. You're generally going to see it on your phone and then have an attachment as well. Like keep it short, keep it concise, straight to the point.
100%. And just the note that spam filters will look at that attachment, and it will reduce the number of customers or the number of prospects that email makes it to.
Absolutely.
So she might be including it like as a link to the PDF, and that's still not great because people certainly aren't going to click that. But if it is an actual attachment, then it definitely will drop your deliverability. Although honestly, I suspect that a link to download a PDF directly is probably going to nuke your deliverability even more, because that's a pretty common phishing attack vector. To get people to download malicious code it looks like you're downloading a PDF, but that link is actually masked, or it reroutes to somewhere else that's going to make you download some crazy shit. So I highly would recommend changing that. Gabrielle is saying great session. Thanks, Gabby. We get a high rate on US campaigns, but super low click rates on UK or Australian campaigns. Any suggestions? So just before we get to Harsh's email here, any thoughts on, and Sandra is saying, thank you to Celia and John. Thank you, Sandra, for being brave and sharing your email. I know it takes guts to let us tear your email apart like this. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was helpful for everybody else that was hanging out and using this as a chance to learn. Let's get to Gabby's question. Hope you don't mind. We're friends now, Gabby. You're in chat. So we're now friends. I think I can call you Gabby. Any thoughts, Celia or John, on high open rates for U.S. campaigns, but really low ones on UK and Australian campaigns?
It's cold.
I'm assuming so, but Gabby, let us know. I'd also be curious what your source of contacts come from. She's in Dublin, Ireland. Beautiful.
Okay. I feel like there's privacy legislation potential issues here that you may need to be mindful of when reaching out cold into
Australia.
UK is not part of the EU anymore, but yeah, Australia and I think the UK even has them.
She's getting them from Zoom Info. One thing that I find that's tricky about using Zoom Info is I haven't used it in a while, but I remember, they're not cold campaigns. Okay, so they're warm campaigns. Okay.
Great.
It must be the accent. No.
Okay.
I liked it.
So is it the exact same message across all areas? Is it being sent at the same time?
I feel like Zoom's data outside of the US is not as strong, but
I mean, I've done campaigns into Ireland and the UK, and they've been great. So I don't know that it's necessarily that.
She's saying, yeah, it's the same message.
It could honestly be the time of day she's sending it out.
But if she's in Dublin, U.S. campaign. So high open rates.
In Australia, when she's sending the email, if it's 4 a.m, then
it's true.
Did I get it
the
backwards?
open rates are good, but the click-through rates are bad?
So high open rates on U.S. campaigns, but super low click-through rates. Okay, I misread it because I'm stupid. So we get high open rates on U.S. campaigns, but super low click-through rates, unlike UK or Australian campaigns.
Okay.
Okay.
Americans get more emails.
And she's sending in local time zones.
Okay. So what I was asking had nothing to do with anything because Colin didn't make any sense. So sorry.
This is what you get. And apologies if you can hear the kids crying on the other side. It's their bedtime, and they are not happy about it. So I think, I would look at the market that you're going into, and maybe my thoughts here would be shoot Mero an email, because we did promise Harsh that we'd get to his email. And so shoot Mero your email. Her email is in the chat. It's marisol@predictablerevenue. And we'll have a look at it. And if we don't get a chance to do this before Greg jumps on and we've got to do the podcast, then I will, there it is. She threw it in chat. Thanks, Mero. We'll have a look at it offline and get back to you. But John, if you could flip to Harsh's email.
Oh, e-commerce.
Harsh, you ready for this? Brace yourself.
So just to start right off the bat, I think that we're all aware that COVID-19 is a thing. I don't really think it's necessary to make mention of it. We did, a lot of tests on this right when it kicked off, and from the get-go, it was okay, but it's not worth mentioning anymore because you're saying consumers are spending more time online than ever before. You're essentially alluding to the fact that this is what's going on. So I would take that first line entirely out.
What's the company name, by the way?
Harsh, let us know. Where are you? He's here.
I found him.
Oh, all right.
I'm good at creeping people on LinkedIn.
I think it's too many periods too. I'm just reading and talking at the same time, so maybe I'll read it more and stop talking.
Like you don't like punctuation?
Well, no, because it's like...
And you say that on National Punctuation Day? Celia, how dare you?
Well, you don't need to say every consumer has become price conscious. Okay. You know what?
I actually couldn't find the company name. I would love to just get a little bit more into it.
It's Green Deck.
Green Deck.
Software company in London.
Dynamic pricing. Okay, we almost had a client like this come on.
Okay, so when he's talking about consumers become price conscious, they're talking about software pricing. Again, I'm going to come back to if you're talking about your competitors' pricing, you can play to the upside or you can play to the downside, right? And the downside is like your competitors are undercutting you. The upside is, I guess it's comparative software or comparative pricing here. I'm going to look at your pricing, see if it tells me anything. No, dedicated account manager. I can't see it. Okay. All right. So let's come back to his email. So we've got 3 examples. Harsh, are you hand picking 3 examples of their competitors? Is this automated in some way? Help me understand what that looks like there. Targeting online retailers, specifically fashion retailers.
Yeah. This is a very interesting solution, actually.
What are the examples of?
It'd be like, this other brand are selling this product for less than you.
And he's saying he hand picks the examples. So this is, I would say you probably don't need 5 examples. I'd say 3 is probably. I would either like if you're hand picking these, I'd probably pick one to say here's somebody that's really similar to you, right? Unless you can't really say like here's one that's going to illustrate this or here's one that's going to illustrate that. I really like how you've got it framed up. Like we help companies do this. That's a really good one. Your call to action is. It's good. It's a mix of everything we've talked about today. Is this interesting to you? Would you like to get a quick discovery call? I love that you're going. So he picks Gucci as a brand and compare them with their competitors. Okay, so you say like, I couldn't tell you the Gucci competitors, but like this brand A, brand B, brand C, are like, here's what they're doing. Are you actually giving their like actual live like price details on, selling like this is the price of jeans versus their like your jeans versus their jeans? Because that could be really, really interesting. Like I've mentioned it a couple times, is getting to that magical aha moment of the product. And if you're able to do that just by on the surface, he's given them screenshots. So that's super cool. I might use this as like a curiosity loop and say something along the lines of like, here's an example, or I have a couple of examples from this brand, and this brand that I'd love to show you. And then instead of doing the work and putting them in there, maybe just giving them the data or sharing the text of like, hey, if it's Gucci, I noticed that brand A was undercutting you by this and brand B was undercutting you by that. I've got a couple more examples I'd love to show you. Can I get some time in your calendar to show you how we can help? Right. And so I'm wearing my Marie Kondo hat today, but I've talked enough here. Celia, why don't you jump in? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like I said with the beginning, I think that could be shortened down. I think that adding the examples is really strong point. I think I'm kind of like missing. I'm not totally understanding this examples thing. That might just be me. So
let's say you're Gucci and there's someone else that sells something really similar to you that's a direct competitor of yours. He'll come and he'll say, hey, did you know that direct competitor who you hate is undercutting you? Here's a bunch of examples of almost the exact same product that they're selling for, less than you. So people are probably going to be more inclined to go and buy those, right? So taking those like pictures from their website, like their competitor's website, to say like, hey, here's exactly where they're kind of like out competing you right now, to have like a really specific example for them.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that he's adding is he's tried with one examples, but then they have a feeling that they have thousands of products on their website. So one could be a coincidence. And so he wants to show like 5 concrete examples, and he's done some A/B testing and 5 outperformed.
Great.
So let's say you are Farftech and I give them examples that Essence is undercutting with the exact same product and color. Farfetch. I don't know any of these words. I guess I think he's in the UK and I don't understand the brands, or I don't know the brands, but it's basically the same product, same service. So so I take back my 5 examples. I understand how that's relevant, and that's the sort of magical moment. I think you need to really dramatically simplify. I think Julio was saying, to Gabby's previous, or to Sandra's previous email, is that second paragraph you really need to be like cutting down that second paragraph, because you're taking away from a really important piece of like research that you're doing for them. You're highlighting information that they didn't know. And that's the sort of magical aha moment of your email. And then you want to point them to, wouldn't it be helpful to have this at all times? And that's you can either say that out loud or you can let them infer that. And I'm a big fan of like showing it to them and then letting them make that leap and come to you, because now they're saying, oh, wow, if I had this, I could do X. And once you've got them coming your direction, now you're creating a little momentum. Sean is asking, is it risky to be in attack mode against the competition?
Retail's savage, right? Like, it's bad word choice maybe, but retail is just super competitive. I don't know if that's probably a bad thing in this case. It's not like they love their competitors, especially if they're selling the same products. Right? They're probably actually very unenthused about their competitors, generally speaking. I don't think in this case that's bad. I think where you need to be mindful of competitors when it's competitors for your product, right? You don't want to go and just talk smack about competitors for like your own solution to people who might be using them because someone made that choice, right? But in this case, it's competitors for their products, and so I don't see that as a barrier here.
He's also mentioning that this is something that retailers are doing pretty consistently, is they're always doing that competitive shopping. So it's like, it's something that's common. Like, this is something that you may not want to do. This may not be a takeaway for anybody else that's watching that's saying, oh, I'm going to do this. But for Harsh or for Green Deck, specifically their customers, this is something that they're doing pretty consistently. And so he's hitting on, like, this is a pretty big pain point for them. So that's why I'm going to talk about your competitors here.
Yeah. I would kill that whole first pair. I would basically start with, do you know your competitor is undercutting you? Here's some examples. You can always have this information on hand to outcompete them. This company was able to boost sales by X and save this amount of work per week. Would being able to refine your pricing strategy be of interest to you?
And I'm going to duck out for just a half second here, but talk to me about the subject line. Your competitors are undercutting you. In the context here, I initially didn't like it because I didn't understand the space. But what are your thoughts? Why don't we start with Celia?
Start with John.
I would throw in so you've already done this work to get the personalization of the competitor's name. I would, as long as they're going to be aware of this competitor, like if it's another recognizable brand, then I would even just put that custom variable in the subject line as well, like Farfetch is undercutting you or something. If they're maybe not as recognizable, then don't do that, obviously, because like, who the heck is that? But you're being undercut on pricing. Yeah, I think within the context of what you do, I like it. I don't know if I would have it as a sentence with a period necessarily. And that could have just been when Mara was typing it in. But
yeah, I kind of agree with that. It's a bit jarring to look at, but when you actually read the message, it completely makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I frankly don't have a problem with it at all. But I think if there is an opportunity to take advantage of this work that you've already done for the personalization and include it because they'll recognize it, do that. If they won't, I would keep it more general like this. There's that loss aversion. There's like the fear of missing out thing. There's this, this is a very real and direct threat to their business if people are able to constantly undercut them on price. I mean, Walmart exists, right? And a lot of businesses don't because of that. So this concept of people undercutting you is, very threatening, I think, in retail.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. And I'm back here. Harsh was just saying, I'm not sure to what comment, but he said, yes, I do that. Exactly that in the subject line. I named the competitor that is, Farfetch is undercutting you.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, if they recognize it, that's perfect.
Awesome. Really appreciate everybody hanging out here. Celia, John, 2.5 hours on stream giving feedback like this. This is grueling. Thank you so much for sharing and hanging out all day. I know this is not an easy one. For everybody else that's hanging out, we've got in 2 minutes, I'm going to jump to a different Zoom line, and we've got Gregory. We're going to do or Greg from Bain. We're going to do a live podcast. So you're welcome to come hang out. Oh, it's going to be, I'm going to kill this stream, Mero is telling me. Cool. So I will, yeah, I guess we'll move everybody across. You might have to click on a different link so that we get that going, because it's going to be, I guess this one's going to end and a new one is going to start. But just thanks to everybody in chat. Celia, John, let me buy you lunch today. And as a thank you for hanging out for so long, because this was probably our beefiest one, with just so many people and so many questions. So I appreciate everybody hanging out. And so coming up next week, we're going to be talking, we alluded to it a couple of times today, we're talking about deliverability. So next week we've got Lavinia. She's, if you've seen any of our YouTube videos on Outbound Labs, she's the one that quarterbacked quite a few of those. Even though I was in the recording, I was literally just a talking head. Lavinia was the one behind all of the gathering all the data, running all the experiments. And she wasn't running them all, but she was certainly helping make sure that we were keeping the conversation alive and making sure that we were designing the tests in the right way to achieve outcomes that we could rely on. Because if we're talking cold email, deliverability is one of the most important things. It's sort of one of those, like, it's a binary step. If you're doing a good job, your emails go through. If you're not doing a good job, so if you want to make sure that your emails are, that you're not running into, you're not mistakenly doing anything or missing anything that might be killing your deliverability, then come make sure you hang out next week, where we'll have Lavinia and myself talking about deliverability. And we'll do some, if you've got some questions, if you want us to look at some emails to make sure that they don't have any words in them that you shouldn't, that we'll definitely we'll be live as well. So, and we're happy to help with that. Thanks to everybody for hanging out. Hit that subscribe button if this was valuable. Hit that thumbs up button. It's somewhere. If this was helpful, lets our marketing team know that we should do this again. If you didn't like it, hit that thumbs down button twice. Thanks so much, John, Celia. Thank you so much for being on today, and we'll catch you all next week.
Cool. Thanks, Colin. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, you too. And for those that are going to come watch the live podcast, I'm going to be on the other stream shortly. So just hang out. I think you'll probably have to click back to YouTube and then click somewhere else. I think that's how this is going to work. So bear with me a couple minutes here. Thanks, everybody. Oh, Mero's thrown a link in the chat. So I'll be on that one very shortly.